not to talk about income level. I was like, the basic expectations was not to be sexist, homophobic, or racist. And my parents were like, you should lower your standards.
Wow.
And I was like,
Dude, my standards. But I would say that like not any more toxic than like the internet in general. It's
okay,
just like
true.
it's very specifically toxic in the way that it's quite misogynistic.
Mm-hmm,
But
so is Reddit sometimes.
yeah, so
some
it's
parts of
Reddit.
Reddit.
it's kind of like a Singaporean Reddit, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't feel like they are any more toxic than like general internet toxicity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so with that really interesting conversation, I think we can seg into our introduction. So like, welcome back to episode 2 of Red.COMIXSG. It's a video podcast about making and loving comics here in Singapore, and today we have two lovely guests with us, Anngee Neo and Samara from Samara Sketch.
Welcome,
So
welcome.
glad to have them with
Like,
us.
happy for
We're so
ourselves.
happy to have you guys with
Okay.
us.
Like we have to like give ourselves
Yeah.
like applause or something.
Yeah.
Just like pat each other.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so today we invited them, kind of like, you know, you got with that little bit of a primer, you kind of get the sense of like what we're gonna talk about. It's gonna be a little bit spicy, a bit fun. It's gonna be really open, no holds barred kind of space, and we just kind of like not just talk about making dating comics, but also about like the what they like, kind of like teasing out like the really fun stuff about like or interesting things about dating here in Singapore. Maybe like go into make it a bit personal as well. So it's gonna be a really, really interesting time. Yeah. So I think like maybe we can give perhaps introduce yourselves a little bit to the camera, so like, you know, they get to know a little bit more about you. Like maybe you go first.
I was gonna say like senpai.
Oh, okay. The old people go first. I can. All right. Hi, I'm Anngee, and I'm an illustrator. So a lot of my work is commercial illustration. So what that means is I do advertising and story books for children, things like that. And then in my personal time, I do a lot of zines. I publish my own personal comics, generally self-publishing. And then I also am known for my educational comics that I do in my own spare time, where I talk about things like politics or like mental health, and sometimes I draw poop comics.
Yeah.
It's very important. Yeah.
It's super
important, yeah.
important.
You
because
gotta
I have found-
diversify.
yeah,
Yeah.
like about many different important topics.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So
Samara.
like, what is this? What do I call you? Like senpai and kohai. Yes, okay.
sorry, a little bit too into the whole like
It's cool, man. It's cool.
culture. So
It's cool.
I'm Samara. So I'm the artist behind Samara Sketch. So what I do mainly is I do fan comics, fan art. I've been drawing since I was still in, I guess, like secondary school, in JC, and I haven't really published anything, but hopefully one day I'll be able to get something done. Yeah.
And Samara, you also published, well, okay, it wasn't really a publication. So Samara, you won a competition at Comic Con
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Because you had created the Dating a Dozen Men
Yes.
comics.
How to Date a Dozen Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one was really just like a 4-page comic. It was like it was for the Singapore Comic Con WIP Work in Progress competition or contest. I'm not really sure which one it is. But basically, I did up this 4-page teaser for what a comic about dating in Singapore could be like. And I guess the story behind that was like right before the pandemic, I actually signed up for like a matchmaking package thing. And then I basically went through a series of guys, and by the end of it, I realized that I had racked up like a very good score of like over 12 guys. 12 from the actual matchmaking, and then like three others from like elsewhere. But yeah, and the comic is meant to be like a journey throughout all these guys and like what I've learned about myself, about dating. And I think the reason why I thought it might be useful is because, you know, we don't really have like a class or like a course or a workshop in school,
I agree.
right?
Yes.
Like they don't teach you
How to date.
yeah, they don't teach you how to date. So like the reason why I thought I should make this comic was because like they don't ever teach you these kinds of things in school, like workshops. Like the most that you have, like, you know, the most, like the closest you get is like what should you do about like sex?
Abstinence only.
Abstinence is the best.
Control
part.
yourself until you
It's
get
so
married.
they don't teach you. They just tell you don't do it, all the way up to like university, where suddenly
Yeah.
you're like, you need to do it real quick before, like, you know, you leave. And then if you don't, you're probably one of the losers trying to like get some of like the remnants or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is like a really, to me,
It's like a race to
strange-
the bottom, lah, really.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
rat race, lah, really. And then I felt like there wasn't really any guide or anything, right? Like it really is about, you know, they not telling you anything about the dating part.
Yeah.
It's like the black box, right? Like it's like, oh, that part, let's not talk about that. Let's move on. And then they jump straight into sex. And then you're like, okay.
It's like you know, you go into this swimming complex, and there's the kiddie pool, and then there's the adult pool,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And then you don't know how to swim, but they push you into the 1.8 meter section.
Yeah.
And then you're just floundering there.
yes.
And then everyone else is floundering and semi-drowning. And we're like, what are we supposed to do? Right? I mean, I feel like that's
And then
kind
they
of
shout
what's going on.
abstinence only
Yeah.
at you.
Yeah.
Like
But they don't give you any help.
Exactly.
like bring a floaty,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
like,
like
they don't
throw
tell you
us
how to
some,
swim.
Yep.
yeah, throw us some like lifeline here, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like I thought it might be interesting to kind of do a little comic, and also I don't think there are a lot of young people signing up for like matchmaking or like packages or anything, like mainly it's online dating and stuff, right? So I felt like I had a really unique or like a really rare like look into this as a young person signing up for this thing.
Yeah.
So I thought like, yeah, it would be interesting to just explore that. Yeah, there's a story behind the comic.
I think it's such a great hook because when we were talking before we recorded, and I was like, why would such a young person go for like a matchmaking service? And then when you explained it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that does make sense.
Oh, did you sign up yourself? Did you pay for it yourself?
Yeah, I paid for it myself.
Legit.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the kind of thing you kind of expect like crazy Asian parents to do. They're like, son, I'm going to like send you on a date with this very like, you know, professional and like talented and smart girl from whichever family. Yeah, like that's what matchmaking
set you
You
up.
sounds
checked
to
your
us,
like
right?
horoscopes and like 八字and everything.
Yeah.
Your birthday, like, does it match?
Yeah.
And
You have checked your fertility. You're supposed to get 2.5 children out of
Oh
this.
my
and,
God.
like, you
the
know,
white picket
continue,
fence.
Yeah,
continue the
fertility,
family
heritage.
legacy and everything.
Pass down the family name.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think so, right? But for me, I actually didn't tell my parents about it. I think till now, I don't think my
Wow.
dad knows about it.
Maybe you'll watch this video. and find-
I hope not.
Alright.
But like the reason why I didn't tell my parents about it was because I wanted to do this myself for myself. And I guess like the reason why I even signed up in the first place was because I felt a little bit of that parental pressure. Like every Chinese New Year, you know, you meet your uncles, aunties, and then they're like, oh, you know, you're this age already, or got boyfriend, you know, and
Why you don't have boyfriend?
No time already,
yeah,
Why you very picky, you know?
yeah, expectations are lower them a bit, you know, give chance.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. Yeah. I think I remember having a conversation with my parents where I had like, not to talk about income level, I was like, the basic expectations was not to be sexist, homophobic or racist, and my parents were like, you should lower your standards.
Wow.
And I was like,
Dude, my standards are on the floor already.
that was my like, I wasn't even talking about you need to make 8K, which I don't necessarily believe in.
Right.
But like,
Oh
we
my
were talking
God.
about this beforehand, maybe we can mention this again.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even talking about income or car or house. I was just like, basic, don't be sexist, racist, homophobic, you know, you're normal.
Yeah.
No, and then I had to lower my standards.
Yeah, how lower can it
How
Yeah.
yeah,
Like you
exactly.
have to dig a hole, is it? Like
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
The bar is on the floor, and they are
Not low enough. Clearly.
yeah, clearly it needs to be invisible actually.
It used to be in the basement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
At the car park there, like basement.
I think parents shouldn't worry so much because okay, marriage isn't the solution to problems. In fact, it creates a lot of problems. So if I were a parent these days, I would be like, don't really settle down unless you know that you're sure. Because like there's so many troubling things that can happen in a bad relationship, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
in a marriage.
As
Because
an
I
old person, that's
as an
how I
old
see
person
it.
who was once
Yeah.
married.
Oh,
Yeah, so like I would say that
yeah.
like, being trapped in a relationship that's legal is very painful because it's very difficult to get a divorce in Singapore.
Oh,
Yeah, so especially if you go into marriage with no idea of what marriage is supposed to be, and then you discover it and you're like, oh shit, man,
Yeah.
I'm stuck now. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
That's why dating is really important. It's that process of self-discovery that you really, really need before you enter a contract,
Yeah,
a marriage
exactly.
contract.
yeah. And also, I guess like some sort of like common sense, which I will admit that I have very little of.
yeah.
Because
It's okay.
Like,
You're
in
an
my
I
head-
feel
actress.
like it's
Yeah.
things we pick up.
yeah, like in my
Right.
head, right? Like marriage is kind of like, oh, okay, we vibe, because we like the same things, we love the same movies, and we can have amazing like philosophical conversations. But like things like, oh, what are your financial style like habits, and what are your long term plans? Like all of these things, like we don't tend to, well, at least I didn't like think to discuss before I got married. And then you discover it while you're married, and you're like, I don't think that this is working.
So you got married because you were in love, and then
It was a combination of factors, I guess. Yeah. But also because like I wasn't a person who thought about marriage and how serious it was. Like to me, it was like, oh, signing a paper.
yeah.
And I didn't realize how difficult it was to get out of it in Singapore.
Right. I think that's improved recently,
Yeah,
right? I think
correct.
the
They just
women's
passed laws.
charter, they just passed a law. So there's now a sixth condition for divorce, which is mutual agreement to separate, right? So that makes divorce a lot easier. Not that
Slightly
we like
easier.
encourage it
Yeah.
or whatnot, but people should look into your, I guess, like the rights and restrictions around marriage before you get married. I mean, even just as a young person at any point in your life, before you even go on a date, you should understand what the whole enterprise of marriage is lah. Yeah, I think that's really
Yeah.
important.
But I think that's
Definitely.
also like the thing, right? Like a lot of people think that you should enter a dating relationship with the intention to get married. But actually, I think in our generation, it's less and less. A lot of people choose not to get married. Like, or a lot of couples that I know got married only because of like BTO.
BTO.
Yeah.
I think that's like the common thing now. It's like the expectation, really. And I think that's why we don't think about marriage and like in any other way other than like the BTO, the rat race, and the one straight path that you gotta take.
Yeah.
And then we just don't think about like all the other factors like behind that and how to make it successful.
I agree. Yep.
Which is why I think like, having all these like self-exploratory like material and dating and then figure things out like Ling Ying mentioned is so important. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but I don't know. I think it's interesting also. I think that's why you want to sort of like put down all these experiences that you guys have like had. I think it's very unique and very different and interesting. And like when it comes to also one thing I was wondering, like how did you guys decide that this is the kind of comic that you want to draw? Like mostly because I know like yours is like more like a traditional sort of format for a comic, and then yours is like an Instagram comic. So like how did you guys sort of like decide to, after all this like coming up with all these like experiencing all these things and then deciding like, okay, I'm gonna put it down in this specific way? Or like
Yeah, maybe like you can tell us also what was the impetus, like what was that moment where you decided like I'm going to pick up my pen and I'm going to draw this date that was horrible. Like I mean, I think it's a very, very interesting moment to understand, for you as an artist also, like what actually drove you to do that? You didn't expect to, right?
Okay, so it's a really kind of funny story that has nothing to do with love, dating, or whatever. So basically, the WIP submission was coming up, and I only had like a few weeks to rush out something.
Mm.
And I knew that like the previous time I signed up for this, I actually spent like 2 whole weekends of just sitting there at my desk and just like drawing until my hand ached. And I did this whole comic about like these superhero characters that I created,
I
you
read
know.
that. It's so good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I really put a lot of effort into that one, and but I did it over like a period of like a month or something, because there was a lot of planning that had to be done beforehand, and my art style, like it was a lot more detailed for that one. And for this one, I only had a few weeks because I was also rushing out some submissions for some commissions that I had, you know, and like I was also like sitting in for like events like DC Fandom, and like I had a lot of stuff going on in my life. And so when the submission deadline was coming up, I was like, you know what? Let's do something simple. You know, either I do something that, you know, I want to read, you know, as a person, like, or I do something that is so easy to create that it just writes itself. And the thing that I wanted to do was actually the first one, right, which was actually to create like a romance comic about superheroes as well. But I felt like that would have required a lot of effort. You know, I had to create new characters from scratch and all that. Then it would basically just be the previous version, you know, the like what I did for the previous round, just rehashed. And then I was like, never mind. Let's do something that will write itself. So it just happened that I was also going through like a thing where I was, you know, still feeling like maybe I should, you know, jump back into the dating scene. You know, I've taken a long enough break, but then also feeling like maybe not, you know, I'm still like reeling from all the weird experiences that the trauma.
Yeah, trauma.
Yeah, so that's when I thought, you know what, let's just put it into like a comic just for fun, you know, like if people like it, then great. If people don't like it, then sure, you know, like at least I have fun doing it. And the more I drew it, I just started adding memes into it because it's just really funny, like the kind of things that people say, the kind of things that people do.
Oh man,
Yeah, and like sometimes I just feel like my whole life is like a big meme, you know.
definitely.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up drawing that. How about you?
Like I would say that it's a very similar process actually. So mine was done in 2020, and during 2020 like was an incredibly crazy year for me, because during the 2020 elections I was very busy.
You're volunteering.
I was volunteering, and also in my spare time, I was creating like educational comics. So I was making comics about like, you know, what does an MP do? So I had to do all these research about like what are MPs and what do they do, what's their jurisdiction, and then you know, kind of making sense of the information, making it into a comic, and then like putting it online, and then also fact checking it. So that was one. Then I did another one about our parliament history. So I tried to condense like 50 something years of elections into a 10 panel comic, and that kind of took a really, really heck lot of research. And so during this period, I was so busy that I asked my clients to delay my deadlines. And I was super lucky because my clients understood what I was doing, and then they gave me a lot of like freedom to do what I was doing during that period of time. And they were like, okay, we're not going to bother you since you're so busy, right? Like get in touch with us after you're done with the elections, and then we'll continue a project then. But what happened was that my previous projects clashed with my new projects, so I had like a avalanche of deadlines for the months after. So I was working on that like night and day. I was already like really tired. And then something happened during that period of time as well. I think something to do with mental health. So it triggered me to like go do research about like mental health and practices in Singapore. So while I was doing that, all that research and making it into a comic, I also solicited comments from people who were suffering from mental health issues and seeking treatment in Singapore. So like a lot of people were writing to me about, you know, how their treatment went and how they like, so it's super duper depressing. And I was the only one processing all these things, you know. I had to, you know, parse the information and put it up for people to read. So I was just so bloody burnt out. I was like, oh my god, I don't want to like people anymore. I don't want to do all these things anymore. Like it took a real toll. So I was like, you know, I still want to create, but I want to make something like completely brainless, right? And again, you know, like turn to something that you've experienced because it's the easiest thing to draw, right? So that was how my comic came about. I just like, I don't want to make anything like, you know, that it needs to use my brain. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, just let it write itself.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. So it wasn't, because I always imagined it was something like you went for a date and then it was so bad, and then you went home and then you're like, you know what? This is artistic inspiration.
Okay,
I'm going to write it out.
I gotta say though,
Yeah.
like after a while of doing all those dates, right, I started writing down every single one, like all the details, because I would rant to my friend about it. But I started like writing them down. I was like, you know what? Maybe one day this would like end up being really good
Inspiration.
material for a comic. You know, in case I ever like need something real quick, and it all came in handy, like I guess. Yeah.
Okay. No, I thought it was really funny that, so Samara, you said the stories would write itself, and then Anngee, you said I wanted to do something completely brainless. So I'm just thinking like, actually, how is it that like dating content, actually that's why we're even doing this episode about love and dating. It's like, it's so interesting. There's so much like say human
To unravel.
condition, psychology, like societal expectations and all that woven into this one topic.
We say that I would say that like for me, making the content doesn't require a lot of brain space because I experienced it. And right now what you're trying to do is basically just get the experience on paper. And I would say that also, right, like there are of course times where you have to like modify the material, right? Because most times like the things when it happens in real life, it's never that funny, right? Which is why you go cringe, you don't start laughing, right? So you have to like almost exaggerate some things to reach the natural comedic ending, right? Especially if you're trying to fit it within the format of like, for my comic, which is like a 4-panel comic. So like, you know, it's like the introduction, the then you introduce like the tension, and then the, you know, what's that, the climax, and then the resolution,
Like
right?
a payoff.
Yeah.
kind
So
of thing,
you kind of need to like figure that thing out, right? And
There are, like,
work
beats you
within-
need to
Yeah,
hit.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't always happen when you're actually dating in real life. So you kind of have to extract the essence of something, right? And then try to make it funny.
Right.
Yeah, because mine is actually a funny comic, comedic comic. Yeah.
That's quite cool though. So how do you do this kind of extracting? Like, how do you know? Like,
So one thing that a lot of what was really funny was that when I was making the comic, people were like responding to them as if they were real people. But I guess it's also because I drew myself as the character going through all these men, right? And then they're like, "Wow, you went on so many dates." And I wanted to reply, but I didn't want to like break the mystery of like the creation in a way. So a lot of it is just like one person with all these multiple traits. You know, like on one date, for example, he was rude to the waiter, he was late, and like he, you know, did like a lot of like things or said a lot of funny things. But there's no way I can fit all of that into like a 4-panel comic. So I would take like, okay, he's late, and then make a comic around that. And then like, you know, for example, he was rude to the waiter, then I make another comic around that. Yeah, so that's kind of like the extraction part and the creative part, you know. So because you're not entirely making the whole thing, you know, like transcribing it like basically.
Yeah. So this is kind of a personal question, right? But so how many dates did you actually go on prior to making the comics? I'm just kind of curious. Because there must have been a phase where you went on dates and then you
I don't remember
gathered the
honestly.
experience.
Like I would say maybe 20 to 30. Like there are not. I don't know of very many people who are drawing like first dates or like bad dating. Like so I think there.
we have some examples here.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
like
Hafi did
Hafi
on Instagram, right? Like
show the camera.
she did
Shafiq,
this.
Does it? That one. Okay.
Yeah. So this one
Yeah.
is so raw and brutal, and like you read it and I'm like, wow, girl, I relate to this.
Okay, and then let's give some credit to the male
Yes.
creators lah.
Yeah,
so
so-
I think when we talk about dating comics, like we always think about Date King. Yeah, Date King is from Adrian Teo and Kenfoo. Yeah.
I remember when this first came out, I read it and I laughed so hard because it was
Yeah.
extremely localized as well.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, and it's nice to have like a representation of, you know, like what's going on in Singapore, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do you think like what you guys have went through is like something universal, or is it like a very specific local to Singapore kind of experience, like this kind of like bad deeds or something like that?
I feel like parts of it are universal. You know, like meeting someone and then like kind of falling short of your expectations. Like that's definitely like the most universal part of it. But there are certain things that are very, very local. You know, the fact that like we mentioned, like you know, when we think of commitment, it's like BTOs, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And the way we like cement a relationship, or like, you know, it's like, oh, you want to go state or not, you know, that kind of
Go
stuff.
state.
Yeah, like it's so very like Singaporean, and the fact that we are all so rational about the way we do love. You know, love is like, it's supposed to be a very like, oh, go with your gut feeling and all
Fluffy,
that, right?
cloudy.
Yeah, but then we are very logical when we approach it. It's kind of like we're approaching it as though it's like our final exam papers. You know, like, oh, is there certain like ways we can approach it? You know, like certain
You got
questions.
a rubric to tick off, and then you got higher grades for if you,
You
get
got like your
everything.
checklist.
Yeah,
Do you
right.
like, check all
Prepare
the,
for all the answers, you know, provide the right answers. Like, there is a way that we approach it that I feel it's a bit different and very local. Yeah, and very special to Singaporeans or the region, I guess.
It's like, what school did he go to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
no.
like, what does it mean in
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, that's, I feel, yeah, there's some quirks lah in Singapore dating for sure.
I would say that I'm not that familiar because I don't tend to date a lot of Singaporean guys, and it's not because I don't want to, it's just that I am generally not attractive to a lot of local men. Yeah, then I get it. Of course, then you will get advice, right? Like, you shouldn't talk about politics on your first date. You know, just
But
wait
if that's
until a few more
but if
dates.
that's you,
Yeah.
how can you not
Right?
talk about
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
And also there are like certain baselines that if they are not even met, or you know, they if they cross certain things off, like, you know, cross you in certain ways, then what even is the point of going on a second date with them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, totally.
I think like I'm the same as you. You know, I also have certain baselines that must be met. Like, for example, actually the same things are no racism, no homophobia, and no sexism. You know, and like I am very open about it on my first dates.
Yeah.
And if they tell me like, oh, I'm not racist, but
Oh, no.
I'm not sexist, but you know, it's like a huge red flag.
Yeah.
There was a guy who like I literally said like, oh, I really cannot tolerate these kinds of things. You know, this is what I'm looking for in a person. And yeah, I was very clear about it. And immediately after I said that, he was like, oh, but sometimes I make racist jokes with my colleagues. And I was like, okay, first of all, what made you think it was okay? And second of all, what made you think it was okay to tell this to me immediately after I told you specifically that I don't tolerate these kinds of things? You know, it's like, I don't know.
He's trying to hear from you to be like, it's okay.
Yeah, like what makes you think that I will be the one to comfort you? And you know, like it's just,
Apologize for you.
But it's
Yeah.
actually
If-
great
if-
that he's so
yeah.
honest though. Then immediately you can be like, nope.
Okay, we got very personal. I did want to think like, because previously you were talking about like mental health and stuff, so I thought like, because these kinds of dates, right, can be quite stressful and distressing, like for you to like go back and think about it, like I'm sure like, you know, maybe like how do y'all like take care of your mental health also when you're like talking or making these kinds of comics?
Right.
Or is it actually kind of cathartic for you?
for me it was quite cathartic. Like actually I kind of booked myself like a half a day thing on my schedule over a weekend to just like sit down and write down everything that happened. And because of that, I guess it also helped me to process a lot of the things that I thought I had processed but I had not, you know, and also to look at myself and understand like why did I react in certain ways, you know, was I really fair to them, you know, or is it just me, right? Is it them or is it just me? And like definitely it kind of poked at a few of like wounds that I didn't know were there, you know, a few of the scars. But I think ultimately it really has helped me to gain some clarity on like what happened, because after you write things down chronologically, you realize that certain things may have happened because of certain reasons, or like it's not really your fault. There seems to be a pattern there, but is it because you are looking for one, you know, you're actively looking for a pattern, or that is actually a pattern. Now, a lot of the times it's really, we are just trying to make sense out of what's happening.
This is
Yeah.
such a healthy process. I feel like it's something that's so emotionally mature to have while you're going through the dating process.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I see all these now, but like back when I was still going through it, it was it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of like struggle. I had like calls with my friend, and like we just talked about like this is not working out. Is there something wrong? And there was really a lot of struggle. Especially when if you like someone and they don't like you back, right? And then you're like, but I think I'm cool, but I don't know why do they not think I'm cool, right?
Like, look, can I get my friends to write me Yelp reviews and then you like me back?
Yeah,
Really cool. Right, getting references.
yeah.
She promises to be a cool person.
Yeah, but it's like it's not like a resume or something that you can bring around or like be a reference or
Yeah.
there's none of that, and yeah, it was a whole process. There were definitely a lot of tears, a lot of trying to figure things out. So you may think that it's like it's a mature thing, it's a healthy thing to do, but it was a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Like they tell you that healing is supposed to be cathartic and all that, but like healing is actually a lot of pain.
Yeah, I agree. That's the other side of all these dating comics. Like on the surface, it's like, oh, this is so lighthearted and like so relatable. But honestly, the reason why it's relatable is because we all put a lot of ourselves into all these experiences, and it's very, very like we're very vulnerable. People feel a lot of heartbreak and pain. Yeah, so I think that's why we need comfort from some of these lighthearted things as well.
Yeah.
And that's why the work, right? Actually, I mean, in a way, like the work that you guys do is very. It's a lot of emotional labor. Yeah, that's in the process of creating these stories for readers. I think that's something people need to realize also. It's not just like we're on this horrible date. It's like a lot of trauma,
Yeah.
and like what you said, like, a lot of pain to analyze yourself and what happened.
Yeah. And it's like pain before, during, and also after, depending on like the reception that you can get
Then
from
guys
like, the kind of things that
criticize-
you post.
Yeah, and then
Like-
the readers
yeah.
criticize the comics after that, after you put yourself
Yeah,
out there.
exactly.
I think I'm quite okay. Like, I'm quite a troll myself, so like, come at me, bros. No, I'm just kidding. But like, because because I did go on quite a few dates, right? So like the first few ones when they were bad, like I was like, oh my god, this is terrible. But then afterwards, like I kind of gained the perspectives that, hey, like this guy is also a human being who has his own insecurities and like his own shit to deal with. And even if it's like a bad date, it probably was for him as well, right? Like, I mean, I do make fun of them in my comics because, from that particular lens and perspective, it makes for a way funnier comic, right? People are like, hey, so you never go on good dates before, man, right? All your dates so jalat. Then I was like, well, a good date is actually very boring. Right, like you have great conversation, you go for like interesting event, and then like and then it doesn't work out, and that's it.
That's
Right.
so true.
That's really boring to draw, like, so you want to look for the spicy things and then you amp it up. But like getting that perspective that they are human and with their own like insecurities, and like it really helps, because when it doesn't work out, like when they don't find you attractive, then the rejection is not so much personal, because like I think we do the rejecting as well.
Yeah.
And when I don't know, like but for me, when I do the rejecting, it's never like, oh, he is so terrible, like, or like he's trash, right? It's always like, oh, you don't really meet what I'm looking for, So if you kind of keep that perspective in mind, and when you get rejected, I mean, yeah, like it kind of makes things better, like keeping in mind that we're all like really fucked up in our own heads, and we're all trying to find somebody who's the same kind of weird as we are,
Or
will
ready
accept
to
you.
accept
yeah,
it.
or accepting of all these
Yeah.
weirdness and all these things. I think it makes it a lot easier. And also because I think that was in the wake of my mom's passing away, and then the breakdown of my marriage. So like I started to be like, hey, life is already like too serious.
Yeah.
So like there's no need to make dating also a serious thing. Like I mean, there's no need for me to torture myself over a failed date.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
In a way, a bad date is it's like you dodge a bullet, right? Like when you find out very quickly that someone is not right for you, that's actually a blessing in disguise, lah. Yeah, even though it's you, and then you spend the time learning about yourself. I mean, even if the outcome wasn't what you wanted.
Yeah, that. And I think because like if we are creatives, right, like I think there's a natural tendency to be curious about the human condition and people. So even if it's like you're on a date with a guy that you don't really like, I'm very happy to just chat with them about like what their interests are, because we live in a very sort of like a bubble. I talk to creatives all the time. So I'm always very happy to find out like what other people do. Oh, you're a researcher? Tell me about research. Like, what do you research about? Like, so it's kind of nice, even if you don't really vibe romantically.
Yeah. Oh, that's like an anthropological
Yeah.
perspective.
So you get to know about people, and sometimes I make friends out of all these dates.
That's great.
Yeah. And I've also met people like from online apps that I've never met in real life. For a while, and then we became friends, and then we met. Yeah, so like there are lots of ways you can approach dating.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at dating, like just as a casual thing, just a way to like meet people and find out whether you have something in common, and then don't have too much. I guess don't be too hard on yourself and the other person if things don't work out.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
And if really things don't work out, you can always make a comic,
Yeah,
That's true.
exactly.
That's
It's
real for a comic,
It's
right?
content.
Content, everything is content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if
But
you can't draw, get a friend who can draw, and then
Yeah.
just talk about it. Just make it.
Aren't there
make
like
it.
apps right now where you can use like static drawings, Canva or whatever?
Yes.
Like you just
Yeah,
put in
very
the text
helpful.
yourself or whatever.
Yeah, or just be classic and just put stickman.
Yeah, stickmans are the best. Like the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
primitive and basic form.
Yeah, works great.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
works great.
has there been like any other kind of like interesting topics that y'all have decided like, oh, this would make like a fun comic or something like that, like other than dating though?
Fun.
Or like just is there any other topic that you've like thought of exploring that you want to explore in a comic?
Something that I am exploring, I guess, is grief and like death. But I know it's very like completely opposite from like the more light-hearted dating. But I think that there is so much taboo around like a lot of things. For example, like the stress of caretaking, all these and that. So, for example, when I was doing like caretaking for my mom, right, like I was feeling like a terrible daughter because she was in the last stages of her cancer, and I was like, oh my god, I wish you would pass away quickly. And then of course in my head I'm like, oh my god, you're such a terrible daughter, how could you do that? And I never realized that it was a thing because no one would talk about these things until I read a book about caregiving, and it was written down, and I was like, damn, I'm not alone. I'm not a terrible person. I'm not a terrible human being.
Yeah.
And that was really, really important because I was so depressed about how terrible I was as a person, all my failings and failures as a human being. So I was kind of thinking about that and exploring that in a way.
That's a really, really good topic. I feel like it's so important and so so unheard and unspoken about in
Especially
at least,
in Asian
I don't know
society.
whether, maybe in Singapore or
Because
whatnot.
filial piety is such a big thing.
Yeah, because there's this big filial piety, then we're very hard on ourselves when it comes to like like how you care for your parents, for example. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, I'm still writing. I've written a bit of it, but like, I'm not sure if I would publish it. I have done comics about grief before, and then I've got like really weird things in my head about like, am I exploiting my grief for like Instagram likes? It's like a really weird thing, because it's so personal and it's like,
Right.
yeah. So
That's
things to think about.
It's the very tender part of our souls,
Yeah.
like grief and pain.
It's okay to put all my dating failures up there, but I don't really want you to touch the part where I cry about my mom.
Yeah, right.
Especially like having trolls.
Oh
Like,
no.
my god.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bit effed up.
Yeah.
And then they'll just go for the jugular.
Yeah, man. That's hard to recover from, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
What about yourself? Do you have any?
I mean, I don't really have a lot of like live experience.
You make it sound like you're like a baby.
A little bit.
Okay, like I don't know, like your life is just like so many things have happened,
Because
right?
I'm old. The older you are, the more you experience.
Don't worry, Samara, it's all happening right now.
Yeah, as in I'm going through a lot.
Yeah,
but like,
exactly. You're going
I
through that.
come from a very privileged background, so I consider myself very privileged. Like I don't really have a lot of things that I need to worry about. I have parents who care for me, love me. I have siblings. I have a sister, not siblings. Why did I say siblings?
Maybe you wish for more.
Oh, maybe. But
Hint to your parents.
But yeah, like I have things going for me in that sense. But I feel like there are also a lot of people in Singapore who have that kind of background, but they're still going through stuff. But I don't know. I'm in this this stage where I'm still processing a lot of the things.
Yeah, I think
I'm
that
going
really
through.
is the same like time period. Like especially
Yeah.
now with the pandemic, there's a lot more things that you have to consider.
Yeah.
I'm also like very similar to you, where like in that weird awkward phase where you just leave school and before you hit like a more stable adulthood where you're floundering and looking, and then
Yeah.
the dating comes in, like you're trying to figure like that part of your life out, and then you have your career part. It's a lot.
I would just like to say that it is possible that we never stop floundering.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
By
that
the way,
would.
it doesn't. Yeah, the floundering doesn't stop. I'm thinking, when did I stop
Yeah,
floundering?
I'm like,
I
I've
know.
never.
Yeah.
Because you expect to hit like, I don't know, 30, and then you're like, okay, my life is great now. I don't have to
that's
worry
the
about
dream,
stuff.
right? That's what they say.
Yeah,
that
but
is
then I
supposed
hit-
to happen.
Yeah.
I hit 30 and then I'm like, well, okay, I'm still floundering. Okay, how about 31? Nope. 32. Now I'm 35. I'm like, I don't think it got any better. I'm just floundering about different things, you
We're
know?
just always
yeah.
figuring things
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
And also like it's I don't know, there's a little bit of that guilt that like, oh, I have things going for me, and like, oh, I have a little like bump in the road, right? Why am I complaining so much when there's so many people out there who are having it worse, and like with the pandemic and everything, there's just a lot of emotions. And I don't know, like in the past 1+ years, like a lot of things happened to me in my professional life as well, because I do have a full-time job on the side, and I guess I've been living kind of like a double life, and that's taking a huge toll on my mental health. And I think like part of the things that we've been talking about today is mental health and how important that is.
Yeah.
And I realized that as like career and personal life start to come to a head, and like there's conflict, there's tension, there's all of these things going on, I start to lose sight of who I am or who I used to be. And like when I'm in the middle of a huge experience, I don't realize how traumatic it can be. Like just a few weeks ago, it was New Year's, right?
Yeah.
And I was so relieved that 2021 was over, because 2021 was probably the hardest year of my life. So many things happened that I cannot share. And like I broke down on New Year's Day. Just processing all of that, because finally it's like, oof, the year is over. I can finally move on, and I can finally start to think about what actually went on, But I realized that there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people are going through that you don't know about, and with COVID, with pandemic, we are just getting more separated from each other, even though we still have social media, we still have online calls and stuff. It just doesn't feel the same as sitting down and really connecting with someone. Yeah, and I feel like that's something that we've been missing out on these past couple of months, and that's why we feel like mental health is suddenly something that's so important right now.
Yeah.
I think like this video podcast is really all about bringing in all these different perspectives from different comic like aspects related to comics. So it's really, really great that we got to like get so really deep and personal today to talk about love and dating here in Singapore. And I think like we had a really, really long conversation, so unfortunately it's time for us to end it here. So like thank you again to our wonderful guests for joining us today, taking time off their schedule. And so I'm your so that's Linging, and I'm VNC. We are your co-hosts for Red Dot Comics Den. And
Should we have some last words? Like,
Yeah.
like say maybe like advice, dating advice.
do you want some
men.
last
Because
words?
I think we are both. I mean, both senpais lah in this regard. Like,
That's true. Yeah.
No.
It's weird to give advice when you have not succeeded
Yeah.
in it yet. I guess.
How about advice or not? What
Yeah,
not to do?
what not to do.
What not to
that's
do,
good
ah.
advice. That's great advice.
Don't villainize the other party. I think that's a good thing to yeah,
Yeah.
Very, very good.
for me.
For me, don't forget to love yourself. Yeah. Because I don't know, like we tend to just forget about who we are, right? And just like go into who we want to be, so
Yeah.
that the other person, like don't forget to love yourself. Don't forget to practice self-care. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Take a break when you need to. You don't have to always be like dating all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit much sometimes.
Yeah, I think we definitely can forget to take a break, because if we're not supposed to, I think we're just kind of expected to keep going. Yeah. So yeah, that was really, really great.
That was super fun.
Yeah.
That's really, really
yeah,
fun
that
conversation.
was really fun.
Yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
happy we
Yeah,
got to
so,
kind of like HT.
Yeah, it's
We
nice.
should hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should, like,
Just-
over
just-
alcohol.
There's also like
Yeah.
over drinks kind of
Yeah, like
conversations.
sleepover.
Yeah. Like say all the things that we can't say on camera.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Now-
pretty much the vibe for today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Be
then
comics
it's
and
time
chill.
for us to go off camera. So if you guys want to keep watching, make sure you stay updated on our Instagram channel and our Discord community. Next episode will also be very, very interesting. We'll be talking about superhero comics, so make sure you guys stay tuned. So bye everyone. Thank you for staying with us for this really long episode, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.